he said, when I was at that point, he didn't say it, but I have a number of friends who came to listen also, and we found out, you won't be surprised with international experience, they had made a very clever plan to use the International University of Social Studies of Rome near the Pope, although we have nothing to do with the Pope, with the freest university of the world. We are absolutely, culture can never be submitted to any administration, not even the administration of God. Not even culture is free or is not culture. So I told the Pope, I will never tell you what I do, what I teach, where I go, and he said, okay. So and I made a brief, an apostolic brief, to agree that we have nothing to do with the Vatican. An apostolic brief. They call that a papal bull. So we found out that they wanted, the Brezhnev wanted simply to excite the Italians and the Germans and the French, which will be more easy, against the Americans. Divide et impera, the old politics. Divide to dominate. And I refused. Said no meeting. Brezhnev was very angry. He sent his secretary, Tura, together with the brother-in-law of his enemy, of Kosygin, because Kosygin has been kicked out, as you know. His name is Visciani, president of the chairman of the two, meet us and try to make a compromise. I said, you don't come to Rome. He'll not tell. You know, that's far away from the Pope, far away from Herodes. They supplicated us, please organize one of your 82 centers of research in Moscow. We will give you all the liberty of research. We want a Prodeo center of research in Moscow. I said, as long as you don't sign these papers for that kind of religious liberty, we won't accept it. Because if there is no religious liberty, there is also no liberty of research. Tura was sitting there, in the Hillbrand there. And Monsignor Barriero, vice president, the English was only French. Mr. Visciani had, and that proves how far they are fallen down. This is a proof that they are finished, the Russians, that they are finished, their communism. Because this is a proof, facts, in the presence of the spy who would report to Brezhnev. He said, for the moment, you can come to Moscow and make that. You know that nobody believes in communism in Russia. Le pays réel, it was in French. That's the families. Are not indoctrinated, will never be indoctrinated. We never dream that they will become communists. They don't believe a darn thing of Marxism-Leninism. Didn't say that he believed it. He said to me afterwards that he didn't believe himself, but not in presence of Tura. But in presence of Tura he said, le pays réel doesn't believe in that ideology. Pays légal, the legal country, that is 3,200,000 members of the 18 million members of the Communist Party who are paid to promote atheism, materialism, and all kinds of things. Do you want to ask Brezhnev to repeat the method of study and get rid of them? It's easy. Finished. I said no, let us wait till they die their natural death. They were getting old already, and now 2/3 are already dead. I'm just waiting for the death of 2 more, and then I go to Moscow. Die their natural death. So that means now they don't believe in their religion. Now the third thing, and I finish, this is all to bring to the 7th thesis, number 7, the last. I ask to discuss, and those who are mainly Mazoko and also the others who study the matter, and those who have been in Russia, if it is not probable that in 30 years the Russian people will be able to obtain a different kind of regime. That communism, the abolition of private property, which is an absolute failure, and they know it, and the program of Gorbachev is based on the declaration of the economic stagnation and the great danger that they go broke, and not the admiration, the knowledge that the goulash communism of Hungary is private property, and much more, and you don't know it, that Bulgaria is going the same way, Bulgaria, and much more, and you don't know that Czechoslovakia is fooling Mr. Hušák, and there are lots of new private enterprises, and that is not known, and I won't tell you how they do it. They do it by Machiavellic tricks, and mostly that China is the only great danger and enemy of communism, because there are now 10 million new private enterprises, of which 600 joint ownership with Americans and French, and exporting the profits. So I ask, accepting, finished, completely all that history that William has summarized, that we can, without being used, go into the future and get the communists in 30 years to understand that they go hungry and they go in anarchy if they don't introduce the access to private property through dividends in all the national property. And I finish with that. I want a discussion.
Okay, that's
Just two short ones. Number one, what should the United States do and not do in the Philippines as an example of where do we go from here? And number two...
That's very far away from the subject. No, as you say, it must be brief. If I have to answer, I need half an hour. Let's do it now.
Father, first of all, let me find out, who was it directed to?
Bill. Okay. Then another small one for both
because it has
Morlion
nothing to
and
do with the
Bill.
great problem. Our problem is communism.
Okay.
Soviet communism. I could answer, but I need an hour.
Okay. The other one is for both of you, and that has to do with you mentioned the idea that Soviets are now claiming that they're becoming more religious. I was curious even before you mentioned that as to, and I'm just throwing this out from discussion. Please believe me, I don't have any preconceived notions of this. That the Western Europe religions seem to have been dying in Western Europe over the last 100 years. I'd say probably started long before Nietzsche. To the extent that, as I understand it, that church attendance in Western Europe is down to 2 to 5%, depending upon the country, compared to what is 40 to 50% here in the United States.
No, the United States has gone down to 25, and Chile is 4%. Chile, 4% of the Chile. Chile 4%, and Italy 15%, and France 8%.
I heard it.
But it has no importance to be saved, to be in love with God, or rather to love your fellow man enough so that you encounter God. You do not need to go to church.
Well, my question was, what does that have to do with
religious survival in the
socialism? Let me finish my question.
The religious survival in the West is a better, freer religion of people who don't go to church. In Poland and in Russia, it's the contrary. It's people who go to church in opposition against the regime.
Father, why don't we let, I think Bill, first of all, we want to give Bill a chance to respond to your question.
Yeah, my question, well, let me get the question out. The question was, what is the decline in the United States, perhaps as well, or primarily in Western Europe, as I understand it, has to do with the increase in the feel that socialism is the right answer.
Well, what's the connection?
My answer, there is no real connection. I mean, it would not be an inherent connection. I happen to believe what Father Morlion said, my own observations around the world, that there is still a great belief in God, even by millions of people who do not formally go to any church. I was present in China in '79 when the religions were coming out of the closet and operating openly, with some timidity, but doing it. I visited a few of them, a Buddhist one, a Catholic one. and they told me about their experiences. This was an indication that there were people through that period who would maintain their God-fearing status. Recently, I saw an article in a Chinese newspaper that tried to warn the people about this reappearance of religion in the same way that private enterprise mentality lives long after socialism. My feeling is this: what we have seen is a tremendous change in the manner in which people will demonstrate or express their belief in a God. A lot of them still retain the formal. My mother and father, right up to the very end, missing Mass on Sunday was really very, very bad. It probably is, but what has happened is the modernization, if you want to use that word, of the world has had a great deal to do with the change in the ways the people will express their belief in a God. In Africa, for instance, where you have fetishes and everything else, the modernization process is causing problems. Partly because the modernization process is bringing in the information about a new God. And it's causing confusion in these primitive peoples and all that. My information from the Soviet defectors was that 1/3 of the people in the Soviet Union are religious. It happens to be that my friends in Israel tell me that's about the same relationship there. About 1/3. The first prime minister of Israel who believed in God was Begin. None before him did. So I would say that apart from socialism or the way the economy is organized, the religious factor is still there. And it's stronger maybe in many cases where it's being suppressed than where it isn't. My information on the American churches is in the last 5 years there's been a tremendous increase in church attendance.
Okay, let me. That's an interesting side note on that. There are really the religious revival is, on the one hand, you can see a revival of people seeking universal principles and getting down back to the old fundamentals, and there's no question about it that there's a revival of that. On the other hand, you also, I think, have maybe one of the great allies to collectivist thinking is the church, or the churches. So that what's happened is that there was an attempt to bring together the ideas of God and to sanctify socialism with God. So that certainly liberation theology was an attempt to say, well, you could have God, you could believe in God, and also believe in the abolition of private property and the means of production. Now, so if you're saying that's not true?
I wouldn't have said that would be a fundamental factor of liberation theology, a fundamental underpinning of why liberation theology started was to say that you could believe in God and not believe in private property or deny it. I mean, liberation theology, I think, came out of a lot of need in a lot of people's hearts. Myself.
Okay, Kate, it does, but there's no question in my mind that liberation theology is a wedding together of Christianity and Marxism because they say
No, absolutely.
liberation theology, no?
Proved and accepted by the Pope. There's no relation.
I'm asking what the
liberation theology and Marxism are opposed. And read the books of Gutierrez and of Boff and of all the authors and speak with the people.
Are you saying that
is
that
one of the
proponents-
most stupid propagandas of the Moonists and of some other guys who
What's
are
that?
fanatic anti-communists and don't know the reality. Liberationary theology is nothing to do with Marxism. It is, as the lady with her heart says, a revolution of the heart when they see the subhuman misery of the poor. And they want private ownership of property.
Never have seen anything.
They
from
do
any
not ask
liberation
after
theology.
nationalization.
I've never
There
seen.
is not one sentence in one book and in one speech that asks for nationalization. On the contrary,
They don't have to say nationalization. The question is private property and the
they
means of
want
production.
the liberation theology is 100% pro-private property, but in the right hands. Private property for the poor, as well as for the less property for the poor and more for the right.
No.
But this is one of the most
This is a great. This is a great.
one of the most dangerous superstitions which goes around the world. That liberation theology is Marxist.
Well.
And Ratzinger is my friend, and he's the boss of that. Agrees with me, but he has to keep certain men of the liberation theology to do a little retreat of thinking, because both, like myself, Marcus had a year when he wrote too much and spoke too much. Then he says stupid things. So he has given a great favor to a great preacher. Don't preach and write anymore now. Think for 1 year, and then you'll preach better.
Father, you can say what you say, but the writings that I've read, I've seen the effort to.
Do you believe that the American press? Do you believe the American press is
very clear?
Do you believe that the American press is the truth?
No, I don't care about what the American press says.
Do you believe in the dogma of the?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the American press. I read what I want to read are the writings of the people who call themselves. That is the original writings of the people who are calling themselves the philosophers.
I come back to your home for a whole day and show me those writings.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay.
I would like to come back to the original focus of Father Morlion's presentation and ask a question, and which was the original focus was that apparently Soviets from sometimes are spreading the news, especially among the intellectuals and people of influence, that they don't believe anymore in communist ideology, that they like to do something else, and they like to go beyond that. And I would like to comment on this subject. And my feeling is that's really the communist ideology in itself was never the issue of believer and not believer. I think this is one of the best.
Because what he took from Marxism was the notion of the destruction of capitalism, because all of his enemies were capitalists. And secondly, violence. What Marxism wrote, he wrote in favor of doing something about labor. That is the last thing any Marxist government has done anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. So they're not really Marxists in that sense. Now, obviously, today I have no problem with a Russian telling me that he pays a little attention to ideology. Then I ask him, what have you done about giving up the Russian dream?
That's it.
Yeah, of conquering the whole world.
Not the Marxist dream,
No,
but the Russian dream.
Russia started in the 7th century. 7th century it started. Yeah.
Biggest irony.
I applaud. I completely agree. I applaud you.
This is where we're beginning.
This is the best summary. Marxism is that, but the Russian dream is all fully alive.
And see what I'm saying then, Father
The
Morlion,
Russian dream,
that I do not draw as much comfort out of the downgrading of Marxism in Moscow until that is supplemented by a downgrading of the notion that they must be the ones to conquer the world.
Yeah, but does it really, is that as relevant if you see an effort to expand influence over others? You can either defend against it, do nothing, or see what the heart of you can find the jugular that would bring about a victory of a counter effort. And that is, it seems to me that while we can, whether you're talking about Russian imperialism or you're talking about communist imperialism, you want to see what one move could be brought about to reduce that danger to nothing. And it seems to me you go to the power issue. You say, where does power start, and how do you inject into the future a method for the diffusion of power, so that the threat that you're posing and that you're posing can be minimized. And that, to me, should be the leading edge of the counter-revolution, of the true revolution, and move for it.
One has to understand the Russian psyche, how this thing works. The reason the Marx or the communists was so successful in Russia and so unsuccessful in other countries, term ideology, I'm not talking economically, is simply because the basic notion again starts with the Ivan the Terrible, was that the Russian masses, the serfs, consider the Tsar, consider the boyars, who are the middle class, as the bloodsuckers. The reason was they have to pay money to Tatars. So therefore, they invited the Tsar Ivan the Terrible, who abolished boyars and introduced fair socialist state over there through Oprichnina, as a savior. Now, they consider authority, and they always consider authority of the leaders as the saving them from the chaos and from excessive taxes and so forth. Now, the only way to change the psychic construction which the communists only reinforced is it's a long process, and they in the masses they have to be convinced that the private. That's why they hate private property. Every Russian, most of the Russians are scared of the private property, right? Because they have historical experience, very bad experience with this.
You're stating the problems. What you're doing is stating what has to be overcome in any kind of an effort. But that doesn't, you see, if all you do is focus on the mountains, you'll never get over the mountains.
But you have to list the problem first before you list the solution to the problem.
But you see, all I'm saying is, it seems to me that we spend so much time describing the problem. And I think that time is being wasted in terms of finding the solution. Okay, we're moving toward the solution.
My question about the Philippines.
Yeah.
What should we do in the Philippines, for example?
What we should do in the Philippines depends on what our foreign policy should be around the whole world. If we want to punish the Philippines for electoral fraud and repression, which I will admit exists there, we've got a case right on in Mexico. It's a lot worse. They massacred over 400 of their students in what is known as the massacre. They have sent the army just a year ago up almost to our border so that they could win an election. There have been 300 narc agents, Mexicans, killed by Mexican police this last year. They have got so much repression down there, so much corruption, so much capital flight, that if we take an action against Marcos, which is justified, if we want to be even-handed, we ought to do the same thing to Mexico. But we won't.
No, but
Sure.
But Bill, your point, I think your point about the need for America to have some kind of a coherent worldview is correct. That it should have a worldview from which specific policy can, yes, and I think you need that. Okay. Now, it seems to me that within our organization we are stating a coherent worldview, and I'll give you an example. Let's take Haiti. You know, you could take the Philippines, but let me take Haiti. Yeah. Well, what the hell would you? What would you do if you had? What would you do? What would you do within a coherent worldview? Well, what you would do is say, look, you guys are now talking democracy. There's going to be so much chaos. While you talk about political democracy, we'll have another Duvalier. He'll come out of the military ranks. It's just a matter of time. You could have democracy, and you're going to end up with that kind of with the same, Somoza here, another Duvalier there. That's not the answer. Well, now supposing we said that you're in the process of developing, we insist that you develop a constitution, but don't copy our constitution, because our constitution, even if you had it, you would still end up with the same shit. But what we'll insist on, and we'll encourage you to do, and we'll give you all the assistance, make sure you embed in your new constitution that as a fundamental human right, the state will not own the means of production, and that that there'll be a guarantee of access to private property and the means of production, and we'll then organize our tax system and our monetary system and our general planning structure so that will bring about systematically, and our inheritance laws will bring about systematically a decentralization of economic power, without which don't even talk about democracy. Or in the Philippines, we came very close in 1972. We were working with the guys who were putting together a new constitution in the Philippines, and they were the first country in the world to talk about expanded capital ownership as a central part of their 72 constitution before Marcos declared martial law. Okay, so but the point is, you got to stop being going all over the place, and you have to concentrate. You have to concentrate on what is the jugular issue, because if you can get to the jugular, it's like Archimedes with the fulcrum. You know, if you got the fulcrum place, you can move the world. And that's what we're talking about. And we waste a lot of time by talking about the problems.
Who should we approach? Should we approach Marco? Should we approach Corzine Aquino about the implosion
If the
of
Pope, if the Pope would say this, then you'd see.
The Pope is thinking about certain
Okay.
things. But I want to summarize and ask, it is after 4, and I think the film comes on now, if we could agree on the conclusion in one sentence of all what has been said, and mainly beautifully summarized for the second part by Kirk. No illusions to have political democracy quickly everywhere. But certitude, if we work well, institutionally, to have economic democracy everywhere in different political systems.
Beautiful.
Okay.
On different ways, opportunities for ownership of productive
That's the word, is opportunity. Amen.
That's right.
Okay, then comes the question.
Well, I think you ought to now turn to Senator Gravel and let him tell you of his experiences of trying to promote these ideas a couple of years ago. Why don't you